we're looking at a live picture inside of the U.S. Capitol where the House will decide the fate of one of their own. Hello, I'm Julia Manchester.
And I'm Kevin Cirilli. Thanks for joining us for this special report. Embattled New York Republican Congressman George Santos is minutes away from learning if he will be expelled from Congress.
A scathing 56-page ethics committee report accused Santos of misconduct, including, among other charges, stealing campaign funds and deception. The House is conducting other business before getting to the votes. Oh, this is the vote right now, so we're going to leave you with a picture right now looking at this vote.
And the key vote number to watch is 290. And you can see there on the total, he's at ticking up to 277. If that number reaches 290 and no votes are present, then he becomes only the 6th House member in United States history to be expelled from Congress. It's worth noting that this was introduced by the chairman of the House Ethics Committee, a bipartisan committee, and it, in fact, he's a Republican, Congressman Michael Guest, a Republican from Mississippi. And there you have it, Julia, that total has now reached 292 folks, members of Congress, voting to expel on agreeing to the resolution with regards to the vote. So again, they are voting on agreeing to the resolution for that vote.
It's really a historic moment at this time. I mean, you know, like we've said before, we haven't seen this happen with a member who hasn't been convicted of a crime or, you know, wasn't a part of the Confederacy since the Civil War. So this is major, and it comes at a time when you're seeing a divided Republican conference, a new speaker.
Absolutely, and unless people change their votes, George Santos will ultimately ends up being expelled. But again, unless people change their votes, then that would happen. I want to bring in now Democratic strategist Amisha Cross and Philip Wegman, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. Amisha, you're watching this as a Democrat, and you're seeing Republicans align to have this historic vote take place.
And I think it's a good thing. There should be some integrity in this Congress. It shouldn't matter what side of the aisle you are on. There is a step too far. In Santos, we've seen a guy who lies about everything from his name to his college credentials to where he's worked, how much he made when he worked. There isn't a lie that he would not tell. And we also see him using campaign dollars in a way that was obviously not to benefit his campaign. It was for personal use, from things as widely varying as OnlyFans to Botox. This is something that should be taken into account, because if you will fall for anything if you don't stand for something. And at this point, Congress already has one of the lowest ratings in American history when it comes to voters actually believing Congress can get anything done. And for Republicans, who it took how many rounds to get a speaker, and then that speaker was removed, now they have a new one, it has been a smack in the face over and over and over again. They had to take a stand. And George Santos dug his heels in multiple times, so he didn't necessarily make it hard to take a stand against him.
Philip, Republicans have been struggling for quite some time as to how to deal with George Santos amid all of these negative headlines, these allegations. But we know that this seat, this district located on Long Island, New York, is a bit of a toss-up or a swing district. Where does this put the Republican conference going into 2024 as they face a pretty uphill election prospect?
That's right, Julia, because in the back of these guys' minds as they walk to the House floor is the thought that if they expel George Santos, are they basically setting up a toss-up that will favor Democrats during an already very challenging election cycle? And I think that, we're going to hear from a lot of Republicans that the reason they oppose this expulsion is on due process grounds, on precedent grounds. That very may well make sense and be a prudent argument. But politically, voters at home and the American public, they're not going to be asking themselves about due process. They're not going to be digging into the history of the U.S. House of Representatives. Instead, they're going to be looking at all of the sordid details that the House Ethics Committee already laid out. They're going to be focusing on the OnlyFans payments, the Botox payments, the really egregious misspending and mismanagement of resources. And so I think it's going to put Republicans in a tough spot, politically, as they sort of try and make this good government process argument.
Again, you're looking now that Congressman George Santos becoming. Let's listen now to the speaker.
Reported as present. 2/3 voting in the affirmative, the resolution is adopted, and a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The clerk will notify the governor of the state of New York of the action of the House. Under Clause 5D of Rule 20, the chair announces to the House that in light of the expulsion of the gentleman from New York, Mr. Santos, the whole number of the House is now 434.
And there you have it, House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Republican, announcing on the floor of the United States House of Representatives that there are now 434 members of Congress after lawmakers voting historically to expel Congressman George Santos, a Republican from New York. He becomes only the 21st member of Congress to ever be expelled and just the 6th member of the House of Representatives to ever be expelled. The last expulsion happening in 2002. In terms of what happens next, it means that he does not have a vote. He does not have the ability to speak on the floor. He will not be permitted on Capitol Hill facilities. He has to hand back his laptop, his cell phone documents, his member PIN, but his staff will still be employed. They will be managed now by the Office of the Clerk being Kevin McCumber. So the precedent, as outlined by Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, making clear on the path forward. Amisha Cross, I have to be blunt here. If you're Senator Bob Menendez, a Democrat from New Jersey, you're carefully watching the events unfolding today.
Absolutely. And a registered Democrat, I've always voted Democrat, Democratic strategist, worked for the DNC as well as the Obama campaign. Menendez needs to go too. I don't see a partisan line being drawn here, and not many Democrats are going to stand by the actions of Menendez either. There has to be a clear code of ethics within this body, and I don't believe that individuals should be able to basically skirt the law. If we say that we do not want to, or we do not want this to look as though Donald Trump is above the law, the same thing plays writ large for those who are members of Congress. If you are someone who is found who has engaged in these acts that are extremely egregious with the people's funds, with the people's money, you are someone who is held liable to what you did with those funds. And I think that in Santos's case, this is a very welcomed result. And Menendez, we'll have to see how it plays out, but you can only touch the fire once, in his case, I guess twice at this point, without getting burned. And his time is coming as well.
His time has certainly come, and yesterday he was referring to that time coming on Capitol Hill, giving quite a press conference. Let's play some of that sound.
Look, you all want a soundbite. This is the third time we're going through this. I don't care. I was sent here by the people of the 3rd District of New York. I represent them, the political class in Washington, D.C. If they want to send me home, if they think this was a fair process, if they think this is how it should be done, and if they're confident that this is a constitutional way of doing it, God bless their hearts.
Is it inevitable it happens?
Have you spoken to your colleagues to get their support?
I'm sorry?
Have you spoken to your colleagues to get their support?
No,
I am to get expelled tomorrow. I will be number 6 in the history, the first Republican and the only one without a conviction or without being part of or without having committed treason. Now, if the House wants to start different precedent and expel me, that is going to be the undoing of a lot of members of this body, because this will haunt them in the future.
So, Philip, in that same press conference, George Santos introduced a resolution or a call of some sort to essentially have Congressman Jamal Bowman, his, I guess former now fellow New York congressman who pulled the fire alarm during that vote to fund the government. He's essentially saying do the same thing to Congressman Bowman. Does this set a precedent going forward in the House?
Well, I think the thing that we can say certainly this morning is that the George Santos era is over, whether or not there are repercussions and this becomes a race to the bottom where you have Republicans and Democrats trying to expel each other over bad behavior. That remains to be seen. The comparison between Representative Bowman and former Representative Santos, though, is pretty laughable. Certainly, there's all sorts of reasons why you could criticize the actions of Representative Bowman, but they pale in comparison to the detailed and documented allegations against Santos. And frankly, I think that, the former congressman making that type of argument is really telling. Even his defenders, folks like Representative Matt Gaetz, weren't defending him on the merits so much as they were saying, these allegations are serious, but if we go down this road and we expel him, then we open up another can of worms. No one was saying that Representative Santos was a stand-up guy, and now he belongs to the ages, I guess.
I mean, it was salacious. There was a balloon the other day of George Santos flying over the Capitol. You got the Botox, the OnlyFans. He lied about 9/11, lied about his resume. But Amisha, I mean, this salacious virality, whatever you want to call it, aside, Republicans just lost a vote. We're a couple of weeks away from a partial government shutdown. They're debating next week. The Senate's going to vote on supplemental aid to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. What about the dynamics and the balance of power for the Republican caucus and the newly elected speaker who's still fighting for control of the party as it relates to these crucial votes, Amisha, that are coming up?
Well, absolutely. I think that they take that into their political calculation here. However, it wasn't that they were at a one vote margin. They are still in the majority, as soon as it is. And they recognize that there was basically a weight attached to their foot, and that weight was George Santos. He was not someone who was there to basically push forth the Republican agenda. He wasn't someone who stood on Republican policies before he actually ran. He was someone who basically positioned himself after former President Donald Trump and had just gotten involved in politics for that particular election. This isn't someone who was a tried and true Republican. And even though he was a vote for the Republican Party, I would argue that he was more problematic for the party than he was helpful. So at this point, they've shown, and they should be thankful for this, they've shown that, at least to the American public, they are willing to hold their own to account. And I think that that's something very important when who needs reality TV when the shenanigans of the Republican Party play out on Congress and have for months now?
So, Philip, as we move into election 2024 and you have New York lawmakers, Mike Lawler, Mark Molinaro, Anthony D'Esposito, all of these vulnerable New York Republicans who have called repeatedly for Santos to step down, D'Esposito introducing his own legislation for that. Where does that leave them now? Because you still hear New York Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, trying to tie these Republicans to this saga. Do Democrats try to keep it alive going forward?
They might. We'll see what the playbook is moving forward. But this, no doubt, is a weight off of those Republicans' shoulders. There is less of a talking point. They can say, they can respond to some of these allegations about George Santos by saying, you mean former Representative George Santos? He's no longer in the party. He's no longer a member of Congress. We helped expel this guy. But I think that sort of a larger point here, and it might sound trite, but I don't mean it this way, is that, when we talk about reality television and some of the salacious things that we've learned about Representative George Santos, that is a feature, not a bug of the way that Congress is currently set up. You have a number of members, particularly younger ones, who have made the calculation in their mind that the fastest way to power is not to work through the old committee system, not to rise in seniority so that eventually they can pursue, their policy priorities. But instead, some of these members have realized that the quickest way to power is by getting in front of a television camera, by being outrageous. And certainly Representative Santos, did that to the fullest. But now the show has come to an end.
Well said, Philip. I mean, if a workhorse versus a show horse, we're going to have to leave it there. Again, thanks for joining us. Congressman George Santos has been expelled from the United States House of Representatives. That final vote tally was 311 to 114 opposing. It wasn't even close. So I want to thank Amisha Cross, our Democratic strategist, and Philip Wegman for joining us as well from the Washington Examiner. Thank you. And breaking this morning, retired Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day OConnor has passed away at 93 years old. It was due to complications related to advanced dementia. OConnor was the first woman to be confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court after being appointed by President Ronald Reagan in 1981. She paved a path for generations of women in law and across the country.
And be sure to tune in for the final GOP debate of the year on America's fastest growing cable news channel, News Nation.
SiriusXM's Megyn Kelly, News Nation's Elizabeth Vargas, and the Washington Free Beacon's Ileana Johnson. They're set to moderate the primetime event live from the University of Alabama. Julia's going to be there. The candidates are going to make their case to America on the only network for all America, the News Nation Republican primary debate, live December 6th at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel, and come on back right here soon at the intersection between politics and policy.